afternoon, everybody who made it here. Just want to say a big thank you to everybody who came. We weren't expecting this big of a turnout, but yeah, we're really grateful for your time and your patience. My name is Sandra, and I just want to introduce this group that came about and how we came about. So basically, this is all about science faculty engagement, as you've seen. And we just came about from a meeting with that was held by Deconstructing Whiteness on disrupting whiteness last week about deconstructing our department. And so we found that, okay, we were discussing issues in our different departments, and then randomly this group formed afterwards, and we were like, we want to do something in the science faculty. For me personally, I feel like a lot has been happening in our country, in South Africa, in our campus, and within our classrooms, and there's a lot that we need to discuss as scientists and just as people in general. And so we decided that we want to initiate a series of engagements within the faculty so that we can improve our faculty and make it a better place that is more inclusive, more representative, and that doesn't marginalize people. But the purpose of this meeting today is to educate. As you've seen, we will be having an SRC candidate, somebody from an activist from the Shutdown TRC group, who will be addressing a couple of questions that we feel science students might have in general, but then thereafterwards we'll open up the floor to people to just ask any questions, or if you have any points of clarity that you might need. The intention of this space is to educate mainly. We're not trying to put them on trial. We're not trying to put out any excuse for any actions that were done. We're not condemning, we're not promoting, we're just informing. And then, yeah, and another thing is that we want to raise the point that we realize that we're not experts on the topic. We might not even be representative of the faculty. We're just a random group of students that came about, and we thought that we need to start something now. So please do not let that refrain you from, being open to getting educated about things. And the group is pretty open, so if you feel like you have something to contribute, or if you'd like to join in, then it's welcome. We weren't democratically elected by any group of students or anything like that, like I said. It just came about, and we have spoken to our dean and the Science Student Council, and they're also interested in helping us to make this thing a collaborative and open process for everybody. And in terms of who is here, even within this room, we need to acknowledge that not everybody might have had accessibility to campus today for various reasons. As you know, we are in the process of, we are shut down basically. So some people might not be here due to jammy shuttles, or even just anxieties about not knowing what will happen here on campus. And also within this group, I don't know, and we might not be sure of if it is indeed across all faculties, or perhaps there's more students from one department. Like looking at us from the group, we'll admit that most of us are from biology, but like I said, we would like other people to come from like everything, physics, maths, everything, because we want to address issues that apply to all of us as a community. And we've also opened up the space to staff and academics. And if any student feels uncomfortable about that, then the thing is we've invited them on a listening capacity, because we feel that they also would like to know about these things, to learn a bit more. So, like I said, it's just for information. If you feel like there's something you deeply want to express and you are afraid of being victimized in one way or another, then just note that we will be providing another space, I think on Friday or tomorrow, whereby it will just be students, and just students only, and then you can come and just talk more about these things, you know, and whatever issues or concerns you might have regarding everything from the movement to, you know, your assignments or tests, lectures, whatever you can put out there. Yeah, and in terms of the structure of the talk, the candidates have arrived right now. We've already pre-drafted a few questions that we're just going to ask them, and then they're free to go about it in any way that they feel comfortable. And then after that will be like for a few minutes, and then after that we'll then have a discussion Q&A session from the house. Yeah, and that's about it. So thank you to everybody coming, and our chairs will take over. Alex and Ramesh, starting off with house.
I'm just going to start off with a little point. If any of you feel you have a burning question that you don't really want to say in front of the group, you want it to be anonymous, we do have a WhatsApp hotline, you can see them there, just above our email address as well. So yeah, we're going to be checking it throughout the meeting. If you have any issues or questions, just WhatsApp us, and we will bring it to the attention of the panel if it's appropriate. If it's not appropriate, they might have to filter that.
So right now we'll be opening up to the floor just to establish the house rules before we begin. So this is for anyone who wants to take this time to establish what the house rules are before we start.
Just before we get into that, I'd just like to point out we are recording this meeting. The camera is focused on the panel, so you guys are all anonymous, and it's just your audios that will be recorded. If you have any issues or questions regarding that, ask now. Yes?
How can we access that recording?
How will you distribute the recording?
We have a Facebook page for science faculty engagement. We will be posting the video.
Let's get started with the house.
We had a few that we wanted to go through. So I think the most important one was when a person makes a statement or asks a question, it's very important that there's not this clapping thing or just unnecessary clapping just for one person's point and not the other person's point, because it leaves people feeling very alienated. I think that was very important. One thing.
Just in general, speak through your chairs. There's no little discussion groups you guys are going to break into. So, yeah, address us. We will then take responses and ensure you all know how a meeting like this goes in general. Any specific house rules that you guys want to suggest?
When you're referring to this comment area, can you please refer to her as Meja and not she? Any other house rules from the floor?
Is there a time limit for speaking? I mean, for question on the floor.
We preferably allow it to be around 3 to 4 minutes. Thanks.
I'll be as succinct as possible.
Any other ones? Okay.
I think to avoid any sort of victimization in this particular space, I think if we can just avoid naming names. So if you have an issue, maybe say, like, don't give a specific lecturer's name or a specific person's name, rather just address the general issue.
Okay. I don't know any other hands. I think we can begin. Oh, sorry.
Just addressing tone policing. Tone policing. Someone who's speaking with a lot of emotion, you can't say, I'm not going to answer because the way you're sounding is very emotional, because I think our emotions are justifiable.
We're also trying to show respect to the group that is here, obviously. We all have different opinions, but if we approach this with as much respect as possible, I think it can go quite smooth. Any other suggestions? No, we're all good.
Oh.
We just make sure that certain bodies don't overpower to things like chairing panel. So make sure that black bodies are respected more as the main chairs of the
Thank you.
I don't know if it needs to be a rule, but could you please ensure that everyone speaks loudly? Expect people to hear at the back.
Okay, so please, everyone, when they speak, please try to project so that everyone in the space can hear you.
And maybe stand up.
Yeah, and we'll do it in rounds of 3. So do round of 3 statements, questions, and then wait for a response, just to ensure that the session moves as seemingly as possible. If there's nothing else, oh, sorry.
No dialogues, please.
No dialogues. Okay. No dialogues.
What does that mean?
Just quickly, I just want to say there is a chair here, and people are welcome to come and sit in front as well.
Are there 2 chairs over there?
I'd just like to call on Comrade Nikki just to give a short opening, if you can, if you would like to.
So, hi everyone. I don't know if I should stand. Maybe that would be okay. My name is Miki Moyo from the Faculty of Humanities, Politics, Philosophy, Economics, History majors. And I am part of the collective of progressive SRC candidates that have been involved in the organizing of the current demonstrations, protests, or current situation of pressing forward for certain issues to be addressed by the university community and to speak broader to the national current crisis. So obviously I wasn't told that I'll be preambling or opening anything, but I think that it is important that when we start here, we are aware of why we're here and what has brought us here. So I'll first speak specifically to the proposed questions that I received. It was very interesting that the framing of the questions seems as though the reason why we're here in this room and people are actually open to engaging is because our problem is that there is currently a protest going on which has barred people from going to classes. So I'm not saying it's in the questions, but there's been that approach in almost every podium that I've been given to address that. Our problem is that we're being barred from going to class, so we're just going to come here and have an open system where we interrogate you on why this happened, why that happened, why this happened, why that happened, and that has been the frame of the conversation. So I'd like to plead everyone in this house to almost change their view of why you're here and to almost think of why it was even necessary for the measures that have been employed to be employed for us to bring us here. Is it really, really, really out of ignorance that people don't know the prevailing problems that have brought us to the point where people have had to seek extreme measures to call the university community to attention? So in terms of decolonization as well, I want you to always keep the context of what you're studying, what the Faculty of Science presents to you, how you've systematically moved from your first year to your second year, think about your first assignment to your last assignment, and interrogate the quality and the content of the material that you've received. And honestly reflect in this session if you think that it is of perfect being, it is of a very universal approach that we have received the form of education we've received and the manner that we've received it. I think there's 2 parts because people are going to engage the politics of decolonization, but people are necessarily, I know, going to engage the politics of Shakville TRC. So ask from a perspective that you are interested in what has brought us to the point where we even have a shutdown speaking to these issues, and then reflect on, from the shutdown moving forward, how do we actually reconcile ourselves? Because I'm not interested in opening a university that is not yet committed to decolonization. I'm not interested in Faculty of Science that still worships
and upholds Western norms that speak zero to my existence, zero to my realities, that have got nothing to do with the fact that when I leave this university with a degree, I go back to a world that views me in a certain way and that has certain experiences and certain expectations of my being. So I want us to be cognizant of the fact that there are real expectations of what these settings overall need to achieve. And if decolonization is the ultimate goal, each person should leave this room understanding exactly what it is that people have been calling for, and also understanding the merits of why we've gotten to the point that we are here today. So I'll leave it at that to say, even in your approach, this is not an interrogation session. I don't think I was called here for that, but this is a session to pave a way forward, reflecting on what has brought us to this point. With those words, thank you very much.
I've been given a list of questions, and questions that are posted. They say that should say that posed from a view of someone in complete ignorance of the movement and actual events at UCT so far, so as many in our faculty are. So this goes to the comrades who have joined us. For the first question, what is the Shutdown TRC group? Why did they form, and what are the main demands of the Shutdown TRC group?
So, I don't think I'm going to stand, but I hope everyone can hear me. So the question that I'm hearing is, what is the Shutdown TRC group and why was it formed? So I think in order to speak to that, we can start off from the actual protest that happened last year that resulted in many of us deferring our exams, leading up to the process of where there was an accommodation crisis on campus, there was a shack built below Jamison Plaza. So what had happened was that, extending from the Fees Must Fall protest, there was a lot of criminalization and framing of protest at UCT. So there was a lot of moving the burden of responsibility as to why there's a crisis at UCT to protesters. So we developed from Fees Must Fall after feeling betrayed from an agreement that we had as Fees Must Fall activists with UCT that had said there will be no financial exclusion of students. If a student is academically eligible, there will be no financial exclusion. That had been reached in an agreement where there had been multiple meetings with the institution's management, 12-hour meetings, 6-hour meetings, where there was a set of immediate demands that spoke to financial exclusion during the Fees Must Fall protest in terms of fee blocks, in terms of accessibility to the campus, in terms of not being excluded on the basis that you can't afford or having certain amounts of debt. The institution backtracked on that guarantee that no one would be financially excluded on the basis of the disability. We felt betrayed by that. We felt betrayed at the process we felt betrayed at the process where we were at, that we had subsided our protest, we had allowed the institution to open, and we had allowed people to write exams. But yet, when the year opened in January, UCT had financially excluded a multitude of black students at the university. And what we also came to the view of was that many first years were guaranteed accommodation at the institution, but when they got here, they were told that there's a system that UCT functions by that over-allocates residences, and when students get here, they'll find that all residences are filled up, and then there'll be an excess of students that don't have a place to stay. So as a first year, that was a very distressful thing to experience. And as people as Rose Must Fall, who had been occupying buildings, and at that point we had a hall which is near Union, which is near the accommodation, which is near Forest Hill. There's a hall there, Zania Hall. We had been housing a multitude of first year students who said that they've arrived at UCT, they were guaranteed accommodation, and when they got here, they were told, no, we've over-allocated, there's no space for you, there's no space for your residences, and even students who are returning as second years and third years were told there's no space for your residences. So we initiated a protest where we built a shack here at Jamison Plaza to speak to the housing crisis at UCT, and to also speak to a new form of protest in terms of demonstration and artistic framing of how we can protest outside of the norms of shutting down and outside of the norms of an antagonistic sort of approach with the institution. So we built a shack that represents the experiences of most black people in this country, and how we end up resolving our issues by doing what is termed illegal, but also seeking a space within white norms and white institutions and white spaces. So we brought that black lived experiences into a white space. We built a shack at Plaza. It stood for one day. We addressed people. People engaged us as to why we built the shack, or we turned the shack, or why we built the shack on campus. We told them there was a housing crisis and predominantly black people don't have a place to stay at UCT, whereas white people who stay around the area, who will stay around the Botany Observatory, have been guaranteed residence on the basis of upholding the culture, and also international students had more access to residences, more than black people who have gained access to residences. That shack stood on the 15th of February. On the 16th of February, we were told that that shack was disrupting traffic flow on where that road is in front of Smart. We were told that it was disrupting traffic flow, and we were told to move it to Smart so that it can continue being a peaceful protest. Ours was that it doesn't make sense for us to be instructed by the people we are protesting against and bring an issue against, and telling us how to protest and where to protest. Because protest in itself seeks to disrupt and seeks to catch attention as to these are the issues that are facing us. Pay attention to them now, solve them now, build tangible resolutions, and let's pave a way forward collectively. We want to move the shack to a place like the university in its sense. So if we had agreed, for example, to move that shack, then that protest would have been effective. Because tangibly, like honestly, if the complaint is the traffic flow of UCT, then our protest is being effective. We've called your attention. You can engage us based on our demands, and we can pave a way forward together. But we were told to move the shack, and if we had moved it to that lawn in front of Smarts, that shack could be there even today, because it wouldn't have disrupted anyone, it wouldn't have caught anyone's attention, it wouldn't have antagonized necessarily the institution. So we said no, we won't move the shack. And then during that time as well, these same students don't have accommodation, didn't get access to eat at plated residences. These are first years. So there was an issue with that as well. So over that week of Shackle being built, first year students who weren't given residences were eating at plated residences at our will. We used to force that look, these people can't not eat or not have a place to stay while they're in town. So we'd get them access into residences and they eat. But that was cut off on the day that they demolished Shackle. So tensions rose, there was private security on campus. To cut it short, our shack was destroyed. Our shack was destroyed by the institution. People were brutalized by private security. There was SAPS on campus. And then stemming from that, an interdict was developed that was not on the basis of evidence, but rather on the basis of who do we know is people who are part of Women's Fall? Who do we know is instigating with Women's Fall? Who do we know is people who have been protesting since 2015 and are most likely to be involved in these Shackle TRC protests that led to the burning, that led to the antagonism and fight between police and private security? An interdict of 16 people was formulated. That was not on the basis of evidence, but on the basis of who do we know that organized the protest at campus. And the 17th respondent was anyone who associates with the actions of the 16th. That interdict was established, and that's the interdict that interdict is the basis for the interdicts that exist with students who have been expelled and suspended even today. So I just want us to note that there was no evidence on the basis of that first interdict, but rather an assumption on the institution side of the probability of who was involved in that protest. So the shack was destroyed, students were executed and expelled, students were arrested, students were criminalized, and students were taken into a process of tribunals and expulsions and interrogations as to their criminal behavior without interrogating the institution's behavior in terms of response to our protest. What that did was demoralize the student movement here at UCT like at an indefinite basis in terms of students have been going through this tribunal process and the suspension process for about 8 months, and they haven't been able to be students of the institution. At around June, we proposed to the institution a process where we can interrogate the actions that happened at Shackle TRC in terms of protest and in terms of the violence that broke out between the institution and students and police and private security. We wanted to institute a process that relates to the original TRC process and interrogates its achievements, but also take it to a local basis of the institution and institutions across the country where we seek to have an approach of restorative justice and restorative interrogation of why there's political violence in campus. So outside of the lens where we deem protesters as violent, as criminals, as people who are unreasonable, as people who don't want to engage, we said, let's have a process where we'll interrogate the violence that occurred in campus at a political level, and at a level that interrogates both the institution and students, where students can justify their actions and they can articulate as to why there was such violence on campus and relate outside of the frameworks of normal law or normal criminal procedure. At that point, it was a point of desperation. Students had been expelled and interdicted for about 3 or 4 months, and the institution wasn't open to us. We was saying let's have this process of engagement. The institution did not respond. If it did respond, it said, look, we're welcome to this process. But obviously, to institute such a TRC process and for it to be legitimate in the 7 endorsement by UCT must take responsibility of legitimizing this as an institution that holds hegemony over power and like discourse. They could have instituted that process if there was serious the engagement around political violence. They didn't do this. A few months passed. In August, I think it was proposed to council. And council said, look, we're willing for such a restorative process, but obviously they didn't initiate it because it's not to UCT's benefit to initiate a process where they will bring back students who they have criminalized for various, like, for months. They've criminalized these students for months. So for them to accept a process that seeks to engage in restorative justice would mean that they delegitimize the processes that they have ran independently, meaning the tribunals and the court cases that they have ran. That would mean they understand that they must rescind and or retract those processes so that they could go into a process that seeks to engage violence on campus on a political basis. So it wasn't in UCT's best interest to actually delegitimize the tribunals that they ran and what they deem as independent processes that have tried students. So that's how I think we should analyze how UCT hasn't seen it as a sense of urgency to initiate a restorative process in terms of political engagement. What happened a few weeks ago was that, or not 3 weeks ago, around the last few months, around a month ago and a month and a week ago, was that SRC elections were supposed to begin, and I think that's where we can speak around the catalyst of how we've reached this point and how we've reached the shutdown TRC sort of movement. There was an SRC candidacy that included a student who had been suspended and interdicted on the campus, which was Mascolemlan. We were trying, the 28 candidates were trying to campaign on campus, and there was a launch of our campaign on a Monday, where the campaign process was to start, and all of us were allowed to be on campus and engage and campaign, talk to students, tell them why they should vote for us, present our campaign to students, hang up posters, just a normal campaign process in terms of voting. And the electoral commission said that they don't find it fair that this particular student who is interdicted should be risking their life and putting themselves at risk of criminal procedure by coming onto campus and campaigning with us on an equal basis. So the electoral commission said that for them they feel that they can't run a fair and equal election because there's one student here who's interdicted and is not allowed to be on campus, and should they come onto campus, they will be arrested and they will be taken to court because there's a court interdict that has been applied that UCT is a complainant of. So the electoral commissions suspended the elections indefinitely on the basis that the elections couldn't be fair and equal because one student can't come onto campus because they're interdicted. So as candidates, there were 4 groupings of candidates, which is 4 groupings that were running candidates, which is Basma, Bantu, Forward, and Vanguard, who decided that, look, surely elections can't happen, and as a basis, most of our campaigns were around how we should seek this restorative process of engagement on campus with regards to political violence. And we decided that, look, elections can't happen on this basis, and as the 17 of us, we must band together and actually campaign to bring students back onto the campus prior to a restorative justice process. So the restorative justice process could not happen with the 12 suspended, interdicted, rusticated students not being able to engage on a equal basis because they have this cloud over their head of being suspended and interdicted and expelled. So they basically be engaging in a restorative process justice where they are under duress and they are basically desperate because you're going to be going into a process where you must give full disclosure, you must admit fully what you did, and you must say why you did what you did. But if you go into that process already criminalized and already there's judgments over you already, you're going to that process with the hopes of getting into the institution, and you will say whatever is necessary to get back into the institution. You will say whatever is necessary to get Anderson, to get back into the institution. So we said all of the judgments that have been reached thus far must completely be lifted as a sign of good faith so that we can move forward and engage as to why these students did what they did, why there was political violence on campus, why did the institution bring police, why did the institution bring private security, even though these protests were peaceful up until a point where we were antagonized by private security and police. That was our basis of engagement with the institution. So we started as SRC candidates mobilizing around this campaign, and we occupied the SRC offices as a symbolic note as to we're trying to restructure the institution. I think I failed to mention this, that also the shackle TRC process is not just about disciplinary processes and the actions of the institution towards disciplinary processes, but it's also about restructuring the institution at a level of the curriculum, at a level of symbolism, and at a level of engagement, and engaging the racism that exists on the campus, the demographics that exist on the campus, and how UCT does not speak to the lived experiences of the majority of the people that exist in South Africa. So the TRC process was one that would engage how UCT approaches its disciplinary processes, but also one that would engage on how we can restructure UCT to speak to the lived experiences of the majority of the country and to speak to the needs of the majority of people in the country, and stop sort of just constantly catering to white norms and white necessities and white like sensibilities on the campus. So we understand UCT from the point that it hasn't transformed, it hasn't decolonized in our sense. It's a colonial institution within Africa. It's the best institution in Africa that does not speak to anything that resonates with African people or black people in the country. So our understanding of UCT is that it exists as a white power block within the country, within the continent. So that's why it's necessary for us to engage in a process that we deem as the TRC, where we'll restructure the institution according to the demand that exists from workers, academics, alumni, students, faculties, protest movements, and just the general community will restructure the institution according to the demand that they pose forward, and according to like tangible resolutions and timelines that we can set in terms of how we can restructure the institution with all of the relevant problems that remain existing in the institution. So we started the protest, we occupied the FRC offices, and we understood that, look, in order to appeal to UCT and its constituency, we must show and we must prove sort of, and the protest is that we are not these people who are unreasonable and just trying to close the institution and wanting our demands to be met. We are willing to engage. We're willing to talk, we're willing to sit down with the institution's management, we're willing to sit down with faculty, we're willing to sit down with students and exchange with them what we mean by the institution being colonial, by the institution being backward, by what we mean, how do we want to change the institution for the benefit of a multitude of various stakeholders. And at this point, I think that's how we were excessive and progressive in the sense that we actually shut down for engagement. We didn't shut down for the sake of just meet our demands, or you won't open if you don't meet our demands, but we actually shut down for a basis that we want to engage the university populace, and we want to make them understand why we're doing what we're doing, and why it's necessary for us to do what we're doing. So we shut down the institution, and we continuously ask the university's executive, its council, its senate, to sit down with us and engage us, and so that we can plot the way forward for this restorative justice process. The first week we shut down, they did not speak to us. They spoke to the media, they continued to criminalize protesters, they continued to criminalize protests, and they continued to build a narrative around how just the processes they have ran in terms of disciplinary, how legitimate they are, while we are saying they're not legitimate because they haven't engaged the issues we're raising at a political level. We shut down for the first week, we weren't engaged by the institution. We shut down for the second week, we weren't engaged by the institution, and what the institution said in the second week of shutdown was that the academic project was under threat. For us, we're confused as to how that is our responsibility, because we've been asking you to sit down with us so we can cut a way forward. You're coming in the second week of the shutdown, and you're saying that we are putting the academic project at risk. We're saying we're not trying to do that. We don't want the academic project to be at risk, but we want us to build tangible resolutions for the issues that we're bringing forth as workers, as academics, as alumni, as students, as faculties, as stakeholders of the institution. We're saying engage us as to how we can fix this institution, how we can fix these problems at a tangible level, and how we can engage at a tangible level in terms of political violence and political unrest on the campus. So the response we got was this systematic propaganda machine that was reiterated to students and faculties of how we are not considering the academic project, how we just want to close the institution, how we don't want the institution, how we're putting everyone's life at risk, as if our lives are not at risk as well. Because we are also students of this institution, we also have people who are depending on us, we also want our degrees, we also want to succeed, we also want jobs. But we're being framed as if we just want to close the institution indefinitely for no apparent reason. 2 weeks were wasted with the institution trying to criminalize us. On that second week, we proposed the institution a further week of shutdown where we can begin the phase of the TRC. We can begin a phase of collective, we meant by collective as protesters and as the institutions of the union. A collective process where we invite faculties and students and academics and workers and stakeholders that exist within UCT to come and engage with what we are saying, to come and engage in this process of restorative justice and a restructuring of the institution. We said all we want is this week, and on the basis of how well we do it this week, we could allow you to open on what was the 3rd of October. On the basis of how you address disciplinary process and political violence and how you bring back cases to the institution, on the basis of how you develop a position on free decolonial education, because the position UCT has on education is one where they propose, you match by the 8% model and this catering of the missing middle and the poor, which only caters to UCT, because if you consider other institutions in the country, the model that UCT proposed and which Blaine Zimande adopted does not speak to the lived realities of other institutions that don't have a 1% rich class that can cater to the institution's needs at a larger level. So what is being said is that the rich upper class that exists within UCT will cover the cost of the poor and the missing middle. At other institutions, there's no such. There's no one upper class that can cater to the poor and the missing middle. There's only the poor, and there's only the missing middle that can't afford to feed at all. So we rejected that model on that basis. And we are saying that UCT must actually engage all of its various stakeholders and not just adopt a position out of itself, but engage us on what we mean by free decolonized education and build models stemming from consultation with the economics departments that exist on the campus and the people who are knowledgeable on framing or on creating models that will speak to what we're demanding. So we are asking for the institutions to actually develop like a concise and a consolidated voice on what we mean by free education, rather than just developing a position that speaks and maintains capitalist norms. Those are our approaches to speaking to free decolonial education, bringing back cadres, and all of that. They deny it, and they persist. And if you remember, the prior week to the 3rd of October, they had been adamant and consistent at saying we're opening on the 3rd of October, regardless of addressing our issues. We said we won't allow you to open on the 3rd of October on the basis that we have not resolved any of our issues, we have not engaged us at all, and you've only started engaging us on the weekend before the 3rd of October, which is the day in which we've been saying you're going to open, without resolving any of our issues, without engaging any of our issues, and without plotting or framing or creating any sort of framework that will engage our issues. We said you won't open on the 3rd of October. They tried to open on the 3rd of October, they tried to open on the 4th of October, on the 5th of October they closed for the rest of the week. That was on the basis that they were trying to do what's happening in the place, which is forcing an academic program through violence, through private security, and through police. Academics also got on board on that sense that they were like, surely we can't be teaching with shadows of militia on our backs. We can't be thinking that we're running a conducive academic program while it's based on a militant basis. So we'd be having school, but it would be protected through violence. There'd be a block of students who are saying, please engage us, please create tangible solutions to our problems. And there'd be a block of students saying, we want the academic program to continue. And the solution for that you're bringing is violence. You're bringing militia to violate and brutalize the one block of students that are bringing up tangible solutions and are trying to engage, in order to suit the other block that you created yourselves as an antagonism to the other. Because the one block that exists in contrast to the protesters would also benefit from what the protesters are saying. But what you have done is polarize two blocks in the institution as if these two blocks don't want the academic program to continue. Both blocks want the academic program to continue, but what we have failed to do is call the other side that we've been alienating from the protesters in order to engage the demands that are being set. So the institution could not, we didn't allow the institution to continue the academic program through violence and through militia and through policing. So that didn't happen, and I think that was a success on our part, because I don't know what it would have meant for academics to have continued under violence. So the institution closed from the Wednesday to the Sunday, and then they tried to engage us on the Friday. But there was still that threshold that said, okay, let's resolve a date at which we're going to open, without engaging us. After 3 weeks of us proposing how we can engage, how we can move forward, the frameworks in which we can move forward in, they still didn't engage us. And their opening on the 3rd of October was based on an arrogant assumption that there was a majority of students who were against protesting. And we showed them on the 3rd of October, we showed them on the 4th of October, and we showed them on the 5th of October that, look, if you allow us to talk to students understand what they're saying. So that's how we also, that majoritarian sort of mindset was broken, because on the 3rd of October, 4th of October, and 5th of October, we gained numbers because we've been talking to students on a face-to-face and physical basis. We've been going to faculties, and whenever we disrupted lectures, we actually put forward our positions, and we actually put forward our narrative, and students would follow us stemming from that. So we proved to Max Price that, look, the only reason that you thought you had a majority block is because you've been spewing propaganda for the last few weeks. And then when we engaged students, they understood what we were saying and they joined us. So I think that's where the arrogance of the institution was broken, and then they were willing to engage on a basis where they left the institution opening at our discretion. So they engaged us starting from last week Friday, and they were saying, look, starting from now, we won't be centering our engagements on when we can open, but we'll actually center it around how we can make tangible solutions for our problems. The problem with that is that the threat to the academic program still exists. If we don't create tangible solutions on an immediate basis, like the academic program is probably not going to happen. So what we are saying to the institution is that you've wasted time with the arrogance over the past few weeks in terms of creating frameworks that would extend over a few weeks to solving the problems of disciplinary, to solving the problems of restructuring the institution. There's no time left. If you're talking about restarting the academic program, we don't have time to be engaging in a process that will firstly make students who've been expelled and suspended legitimize why they did what they did, and then be given amnesty. There's no time left for that. So what we're saying now is that surely on the basis that you have wasted time, you have been arrogant, and you have actually, the responsibility of putting the academic project in jeopardy has been due to the institution's arrogance and reluctance to engage us. We're saying now there's no more time to firstly engage prior to bringing papers back. Now you must bring papers back and we can engage after that. And they can justify the processes that they ran through and justify why they did what they did and explain political violence after the fact that they've been brought back, because that's an immediate demand of ours. Along with clearing fee blocks, so removing fee blocks to you getting your degree or getting your certificate, removing fee blocks to be registered the following year, clearing historical debt for students so that they can register the following year, and also guaranteeing no financial exclusion for students on the basis that they're academically eligible. The institution said that in this week, they reiterated how they can't just bring students back on the basis that they don't want to set a precedent of how when people are punished, the processes that they have ran will be delegitimized and people will just be brought back and only explain after the fact. The only reason that is happening is because the institution has wasted time. So we're saying we bring students back immediately. And we're saying that by Sunday this week, they must have guaranteed us clearing of fee blocks, giving students who've gotten their degrees regardless of whether they owe money or not, and also guaranteeing that there'll be no exclusion of students on the basis of financial affordability. They said that they can't guarantee those three immediate demands. Those are only three immediate demands that come to my head now. But there's a multitude in terms of workers and in terms of academics, in terms of various stakeholders in the institution. But they said that by this Sunday, they can't guarantee that if they start this phase one process of bringing students back, that those students will be brought back prior to the 17th, which is when we said you could open if you can meet our demand. They said they can't guarantee firstly the bringing back of papers by Sunday. They said there'll be a process where we start task teams to interrogate issues of financial exclusion on a name-by-name basis. So bringing forth of names who've been financially excluded in particular, which we don't have the resources to do, but the financial department, the financial aid department has the resources to do. They said they'll develop a task team stemming from that to deal with financial exclusion issues, and they'll develop a task team to also deal with the question of fee decolonial education. From the basis that the School of Economics has a proposed model for fee decolonial education, and there's a variety of proposed models on fee decolonial education stemming from BITS and stemming from UCT as well. So if you're aware, the School of Economics has having engagement throughout the week on the feasibility of fee decolonial education, and they support it, and they actually have, I think it's 13 billion that's actually necessary if we want to instill free decolonial education by next year. 13 billion is the amount that's necessary. They were saying we're going to engage a various amount of faculties and workers. So this week was supposed to be around consolidation and developing of these task teams. What they said is that we must guarantee the 17th, that we can open on the 17th and that the new program can continue. But on their side, they can't guarantee that any of our demands will be met by Sunday. So we said that completely defeats the purpose of the past 3 weeks of shutdown, and that undermines everything we've been saying for the past 3 weeks. Because now, what is the meaning of us having shut down for 3 weeks and then we open without anything being solved? we might as well have opened on the 3rd of October, we might as well have opened on any other date prior to this, because you're still saying that you'll solve our issues while the institution is open. But whereas our only leverage is that the institution is closed and you have the flexible training program. And now you want to open on the 17th, but nothing has been solved. So that's where the deadlock was reached on Sunday. And that's why I think sittings such as these and forums such as these are happening. We're trying to consolidate it with the faculty. The sociology department also has sittings this week. Because we're having a national trip today. We had a meeting with Black alumni and Black academics 2 days ago. So we're trying to consult with various stakeholders as to there's this deadlock that exists. The institution is expecting us to open a lot of resolve any tangible institution. And we find ourselves being thrown with the responsibility of jeopardizing the academic program. Whereas it's not our fault, we've been trying and we're only being engaged at a time of jeopardy and at a time of threats. And now we must feel guilty as to the academic years in jeopardy, students are at risk for next year, and now seemingly it's our fault. Whereas we're proposing immediate solutions that the institution can apply now, but they still want to run the bureaucratic processes while we're out of time. So I don't know, I think if anyone can add,
I'd just like for the people in the doorway to please come sit towards the front, and then we'll open up to the panel for questions. We'll go in rounds of 3 questions. I will note you, and then you'll answer through me, then we'll get responses, and then do the next round of 3 questions. So at first, I'd like people to just come to the front first, and then everyone then please.
Is lots of space to come sit on the ground here if you would like, or move into the middle area?
This is being live streamed. Someone was just saying on it.
I'd just like to reiterate that this is being live streamed.
Not
It's being recorded.
It's recorded, yes.
The camera is not on the audience.
Okay. I'm going to note the first round of 3. I'm going to start 1, 2, 3 at the back. Please stand.
So my first question was with the account that you gave of the events that have brought us to this position, right? From the university side, they said that the reason why engagement took so long was because there were preconditions that were set prior to engagement. So I would like to ask, is it true that the shutdown TRC group had set preconditions which needed to be met before those engagements could take place, and whether or not those were met, or you guys had to make any compromises with regards to that?
Thank you. Second question.
Okay, I just want to, I don't quite buy your claim that you don't, that your only leverage lies in the university remaining closed. You've already showed everybody that you're a very cohesive, organized group, capable of mobilizing very quickly. You could shut down the university at any moment if your demands aren't met. So, can you explain exactly why it still needs to be closed?
Thank you. And can I ask the third hand?
Yeah, I just thought, since we only have an hour left, I think we can have another house show that the answers don't go on for too long, maybe time.
The time for house rules, I'm sorry, is unfortunately closed.
Okay,
but I will let.
We will try to monitor.
Yeah, we'll try and curtail timing, but we'll open up for responses. Wants to answer this?
I'm going to respond to that leader that is saying that doesn't believe that our only leverage lies in the dark. The problem with that is that if we allow the institution to open, I understand that you have large faith in how we can mobilize quickly. It's not that easy. It's really not that easy. Because in order for us to mobilize, we must reach residencies, we must reach a multitude of stakeholders in the institution that feel that in order for them to join us, they'd be risking their careers, they'd be risking their jobs, they'd be risking their academics, they're risking their degrees. all of those various multitude of things. So, for example, if we let the institution open on the 17th, and on the basis that they haven't resolved any of our issues, we let them open on the 17th, and then their responses that will come perhaps on the 20th in terms of bringing back our cases is that no one is brought back, or they don't resolve it. They say it's not feasible for no one to be financially excluded. For us to remobilize again, we'd be working from a point where we've thrown everyone back into the deep end of catching up with their academics, catching up with their assignments, trying to reintegrate themselves into an entire rollout of an academic program, which will be more strenuous now because we're behind. So if we were to try and remobilize, people will be way more reluctant because now they're trying to save their degrees. And we've thrown them back into that deep end where tutors are saying, for example, tutors in the SOC department, around 40 tutors and lecturers are saying, it's not feasible for us to continue at this point. It's not feasible for us to try and say, students must catch up with their assignments that were due within the past 3 weeks and also catch up with the tests that were due in the past 3 weeks within this short time frame, and also write exams, and also have an entire curriculum restructured and the timetable restructured in order to suit this short time we have left. So if we demobilize now, we find it unfair to try and remobilize again if our demands are not met. Because people are going to be back into an academic program, and it's not feasible to expect people to drop like they're catching up at a point where we need to satisfy again. So that's why it makes more sense for the institution to meet the immediate demand that we're presenting now before we can open, so that we can allow people to continue the academic program without the threat of another disruption, because that's also an inconvenience of there was a disruption, nothing was solved, and then we opened, and now we will be upset with how nothing was solved and how nothing is getting solved, and they want to shut down again. It's just like there's a lot of people to consider. International students have visas that they have to pay accordingly to. It's not conducive to protest, to open and to demobilize and mobilize again. It's not that.
Okay, so I'll answer the first question of preconditions. Again, please, the framing is very important. If you just look at the shutdown thing, it's a bit awkward to actually engage. But on the terms of preconditions, there were existing problems that had caused conflicts between people who believed that something needed to be done with the issues that were currently violating, abusing, extinguishing, the worst kind of word you can ever imagine of a person being systematically violated. Think of that was happening. There were people who said we're taking it up to ourselves because we cannot breathe, we are suffocating, our lives, we are at the brinks of financial exclusion, all these things are happening to us, but then the university is fine, let us do something about it. So you have that situation. We are going to give the institution a solution. First, we formulated the TRC. But there were specific reasons why we shut down the campus, because the university had been aware of certain issues and had done nothing about it. So on those specific reasons, there were two that I'm going to tabulate right now. The one was bringing back our cadres. We believe that since the institution knew from June that they needed to have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission or process whereby we reconcile our differences, we find the roots of the conflicts, and we try and deal with them. They needed to first acknowledge that the manner in which they approached dealing with the protests last year was incorrect. You can't just take people out and expect life to go on as normal. They weren't the problem. The problem was the problems that those people were attacking by protesting. So do you see how then, if you want to commit to a process of reconciling the institution, you first need to acknowledge that you created a problem by solving a problem in a problematic way. So we say, bring back those people and let us have a conversation. 2, satellite campuses shut themselves down, independent of us, the candidates on campus. They said, we have issues. Let me make Hidding as an example. There's a lecturer sexually violated a student. The matter was taken up to the deanery. The deanery responds by saying, hi student, you were sexually violated. We need this guy here to finish the term. Why don't you take leave of absence and go home? The students know the issue. Imagine the Monday the lecturer comes in, we'll continue as if nothing happened. Those students said, no, we are tired of UCT failing to deal with our problems. We are going to shut down until the demands which are reasonable to be met, because it's just calling for a meeting with the deanery to say, fix this, fix that, take that person away, take that person through HR, do this, do that, do it, get it done. Satellite campuses were the first precondition. Meet the conditions of those, meet the demands of those satellite campuses. 2, bring back the cadres
and commit to a date where we will start the institutional review and commission where we deal with all the issues that have had people actually protest. That means that the science faculty, if there are issues that you ever felt like, I cannot breathe at UCT, I cannot continue like this. I'm in the philosophy department. 2 people in the postgrad level are people of color. Tell me if there's no reason for me to protest, because that means that next year I will not be getting into postgrad level. My dreams of becoming an academic, there is no black female in the whole department. Even staff, the reception, from reception until you go up, it is basically white people. Should I not have a problem with the fact that my dreams are already cancelled before I can even apply for them? Bring all those issues to the table, let us talk. But how are we going to talk when you have said that your solution was to take every person who's ever protested? That means if you have to protest tomorrow, you'll be interdicted. You have to protest, you'll be expelled. Bring them back, let us start the process. So those are the preconditions that Umax Price is telling you guys we had. We just said, sort out satellite campuses, because if we should commit to going back to class, you should deal with the things that are a problem in their classes. It's not fair for us to call everyone to go back to class when their problem is the class. Secondly, bring back the people, so we start the conversation on a fair and an equal basis. And we said that should they commit to that, we commit to a date of the TRC, we know those things have been met, we will go back to class, provided we also, because we cannot act like we're in a vacuum. There is the national question. What is going on in other institutions? People are saying, we protested last year for fees to fall. Fees haven't fallen. What are our vice chancellors saying? Our vice chancellors are saying, if you say you can't afford university, I'll send police to shoot you, I'll send private security to come and arrest you, because you can't tell us that you can't afford varsity. Go and not afford it outside the campus. So I'm taking too long, but then we had said that also have everyone come together and answer the question of fees. Are fees feasible, yes or no? Our economics departments believe it is feasible. So how are we as an institution going to take the responsibility to go to the government and say, give us what we want? So those are the preconditions to the process of the TRC, and that was what we needed in order for us to go into the process as soon as possible.
I'll just open up for the next round of 3 questions. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. So number 1, please.
Sorry? Kind of in the hypothetical situation, I don't know how likely it is at the moment, but our demands as students are met, your demands are met, and there's kind of an agreement that we go back on Monday. What's the feasibility of that? Is it even appropriate, given the national question, given what's happening in the team leaders? So kind of, even though things have been relatively calm lately, especially for the temporary shutdown, is it appropriate for us to work at all? Is it, yeah, I don't know, just from your guys' perspective as well, is it, given the national question, would it be, can we even go back and sit in our classes and pretend like fees are not an issue anywhere else, or other comrades not being arrested at CPUT, or, so yeah, I don't know how much you guys have engaged with that or thought about that, and yeah.
I guess my question's on a similar vein, but beyond the TRC process at UCT, what is Stratford TRC and the UCT fees must fall's approach, or at least view on the national question of fees must fall, and will we commit to not going back as UCT if that national question is not?
Thank you. And then number 3.
So my question is one that I've had since last year in general, and it's on the question of black bodies. So when it suits us, we kind of recruit for black bodies and stuff. And we acknowledge that all of us are black, but a lot of us are, I'm Zimbabwean, I might be a South African citizen, but I identify as being Zimbabwean. And there's a lot of situations where I do attend plenaries, I attend these faculty meetings and stuff, and there are times where things do become quite exclusionary on a black bodies level, and no one wants to address this. Also, are we really addressing the questions of international students and the visas things? What does fees must fall mean in context to someone who's in Kenya and stuff? Like, international black students are stressed. I think we need to understand how they are stressed. And they very much understand our issue right now, but bear in mind that they pay twice the fees and have to get like these visas, which South Africa makes absolutely difficult. So where are we in that space of contextualizing black bodies that aren't foreign and stuff? You know, there was a question on Twitter on the whole xenophobia thing. Some people genuinely think that there are a lot of situations when things are xenophobic. And in the same breath, people want to call this movement Ichimurenga, which is, I feel like, absolutely disrespecting the colonization of my country. So, like, I would just like to, like, address this as a whole, because sometimes I feel like when we attend plenaries, there are things that, like, people decide that they want to focus on, and then we don't, like, decide we want to speak on, like, other issues. So,
and they're starting from scratch. So if a worker's been working here for 20 years, all of the money that they've accumulated as a worker for GFAS has not come through, or for Supercare has not come through. Not all workers have been insourced. There's about 30 Supercare workers, I think, who cannot be found at all, who've been fired by UCT. There's workers, we're trying to also speak to the issue of workers who were retrenched since the outsourcing process began, and how they've been redressed in that they have been educated for, was their settlements given to them. We're speaking about cafeteria workers from Big Chef, who about 37 to 40 have been retrenched. And what Wayne, the owner of the Big Chef company, has done is that he offered them a settlement of, I think, 150 Rand after letting them go. So he's only giving them 150 Rand, that's why they're from their job. So what we're saying is that Wayne must actually take the money that he pays as rent to UCT, and UCT must pay those workers as a retrenchment settlement if Wayne is leaving, because Wayne is supposedly leaving the institution as an owner of cafeteria shops. Those workers must be kept in the future for any cafeterias that open in place of Wayne, and they must get like relevant and sufficient settlement packages should they be retrenched, and not just 150 Rand to go home. So we're in a process where we're trying to track down all of the workers that UCT has fired throughout the insourcing process. It's difficult, a lot of numbers have changed, we don't have addresses, we're struggling to get information from UCT. But these are like some workers' demands that we're speaking about. There's an extensive list of them, but these are like sort of immediate ones. So it's a struggle, and also we're struggling to consolidate workers' voices, because UCT won't let workers have what we deem as a mass meeting of all workers where they can consolidate their demands and issues. So we've even started petitioning to say UCT must release all workers for a set period of time, where at least they can engage and they can bring forth their issues, and they can speak to how they can consolidate themselves in terms of adding to the TRC process that we envision, and also restructuring the institution at a labor level. So for labor workers, cross staff, admin staff, and workers, cleaners, security. We're trying to allow them to have a consolidated voice that is equal and fair, and outside of this framework where we as students and management sort of have a discussion about workers on the basis that we are the mediators between workers and the institution. We want workers to be directly involved in these processes and be considered as valuable stakeholders rather than dispensable objects, or sort of people that you don't really have to talk to, but rather can have someone talking between you and them. So that's the struggle we've been having, and we've been pushing the institution to try and let workers go so that we can consolidate their voice, and we're still trying to do that.
Okay, so briefly, the fourth question was on the practicalities of ending financial exclusion, and why it hasn't been done if it was committed to last year. So like, I don't know if I want to give you a very flowery answer or a very frank answer. So the frank answer would be, for instance, the issue, let me make an example, the Wayne issue, workers were retrenched, taken away, nothing was going to be done about it. Until during the shutdown, we added it as an immediate demand, and then and only then did UCT say that, hey, Wayne, we're not going to take rent from you. We urge you to take the rent and redistribute it to the workers. Same model you used for the issues we brought up. We brought up issues last year during Roads Must Fall, and what happened is, to take away the protest and go back to class, the university just flowery agreed to things. Yes, we'll do that. We'll end financial exclusion. It never happened because there was no direct threat. Right now, it is possible for them to commit to doing it. And that's why I'm saying I might not be an economist, but if you have the School of Economics commit to say these things are possible and can be done, and then we just have to start the process. UCT will not start the process unless there's actually pressure on UCT. So right now the pressure is the academic project is at stake. That is where you will see the true colors and powers of UCT being able to achieve all these things. And mind you, if all of us had said we're not going back to class until you answer this, UCT is able and capable of doing it, and will do it because the power vested on them and the financial abilities of mobilizing finances from the private sector is there. Max Price himself said, I can mobilize the private sector to give us money if we have to do these things. Should you want us to do these things before we have to scrap out the whole academic year, because we have a lot to lose there.
So I think it's a matter of what pressure exists, and should the pressure exist, UCT is then able to move and respond in a positive direction, and our demands are always met every time there's pressure and something at stake for the university to lose.
Thank you. I'm going to take the next round of 4. So I need 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hi, I'd like to thank the candidates for opening up this opportunity.
Sorry, louder.
To engage. I'd like to thank the candidates for opening up this opportunity for people to engage in these critical issues. I'm very disappointed as a student because our academics have so much power to convene these meetings, but they have not convened them. But when we students, we have no power to convene them, they come and question them. How do you decolonize science? But there's so much you can research online. There's so much stuff people have compiled. I mean, for example, we go in science classes, we research the thermodynamics law. But then how does it apply to South African solutions, to African solutions? In computer science, they develop all these things which are solving European and Western problems. What about African problems? What about a child in Kailicha who does not have access to a phone? Like, how are we developing solutions in science to solve African problems? That means decolonizing science. And also acknowledging the violence that science has inflicted on bodies. I mean, in biology, they used to say homosexuality is a mental illness, and then they retracted it, but society still has retained that thing of viewing homosexuals as people who are mentally disturbed, but it's stemming from science. It's going there and saying, in science we wield so much power, and we need to take responsibility of the power that we wield.
It's not so much a question, sort of the same thing, but more to enlighten on what's going on in the School of Economics. I went to the meeting on Monday and the meeting on Tuesday. I didn't choose to come here, I'll go for one today. But they have been looking at various policies that have been submitted, not from UCT or to UCT in particular, but rather to the country as a whole. And I think most of the conclusions that came out of that were that obviously taxing the rich was a big component of it. Others advocated for NSFAS to carry on, but to improve in its efficiency. But I think as much as it's feasible, it also doesn't look very possible at the moment with the whole political situation, with Praveen being almost arrested. Unfortunately, it is so sad, but all of this would have to go into the budget for next year, like right now, and I think it's very good timing that Praveen has sort of been taken off as Minister of Finance, and yeah, it just doesn't seem like any of this is going to happen. So I really sympathise, and I really hope that we can find a way forward. But does that mean, like, if this doesn't get into the budget for this year, does that mean, what does that mean for our future?
Thank you. Hand number 3.
I just would like to react on the answer about the lady with regards to decolonization in biology. And the first thing I'd like to say is something was mentioned about the land. And I would like to point out in the Department of Biology there's actually a unit that is actually dedicated for that purpose. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is decolonizing. I want a better answer with regard. I wasn't satisfied with the answer I was giving about decolonization with regards to the Faculty of Science. I don't disregard the idea with regards to other faculties, in fact, I might move forward. But with regards to the example that was given about Jackda's penguins or king penguins, sorry, does that mean that when you're decolonizing, let's say, biology, that you can't use any examples from outside of South Africa? And I would like to also mention, from my personal experience, I'm a foreigner, I'm not from South Africa. I've been in South Africa for 5 years. 5 years in the Department of Biology, I know more about the biology of the South African country, specifically about South Africa. And I do feel that what he said there was wrong, because 90% of the examples that are used to teach biology in the Department of Biology are actually South African examples.
Can I just ask one last question? 4,
Yeah, so basically, a friend and I attended a meeting at the university.
Sorry, can I ask you to project? I can't hear you.
Yeah, all right. So a friend and I attended a meeting at FICO about 2 weeks ago, and this meeting was really dedicated to the inner workings of the TRC itself, how it will be structured and things like that. But at the time, not many details were fleshed out. So I wanted to know if we could have some insight into that, namely the TRC itself, not the ideology, not the philosophy surrounding the TRC, but rather questions with regards to how the TRC will, let's say, guarantee meaningful long-term change and impartiality, and who will chair the committees and things like that. There are practical questions surrounding how to set up the TRC and not the philosophy surrounding the TRC itself.
Okay, I'm going to allow for responses and then we'll take the next round.
Okay, so can I respond to your submissions, because I wanted to directly respond. I was actually thinking about this coming here because I thought that it was going to be one of the coming questions. How do we even start to decolonize science? Because science is true because it is science, and what can you do? And my response to that was, if I personally were committed to enforcing decolonization, science as a whole is a product of Western modernity, and the whole thing should be scratched off, especially in Africa. So if you want practical solutions to how to decolonize science, we'd have to restart science from, I don't know, an African perspective, from our perspective of how we've experienced science. For instance, I had a question for all the science people is, there's a place in KZN, and they believe that through the magic, the black magic, you call it black magic, they call it witchcraft, others, that you are able to send a lightning to strike someone. So can you explain that scientifically? Because it is something that happens if
Sorry. I need to address you directly. When we started this, we agreed on certain house rules.
Okay.
And by you doing that, you're disrespecting the sacredness of the space. And so I'd like to ask you to first please apologize to the panel directly. And then number two, understand the rules that we went by in this space. Because it's going to be very problematic. When we started, this is not an antagonizing space. And so what you're trying to do is collapse the space and make it antagonizing, which we will not allow. This is a progressive space for people to say their opinions. And we have noted how those opinions are going to be laid out. So I would like you to first apologize and then go on and agree to abiding by the rules of the space. Otherwise, I would, if you're not willing to do that, I'd please ask you to remove yourself from the space. But those are the rules of engagement of the space.
Okay, I'm very sorry to the panel.
Okay, and you agree to abide by the rules of the space. Thank you. Please carry on.
So I will finish. See, that very response is the reason why I am not in the science faculty. I did science throughout my high school years, and there was a lot of things that I just, but it's fine. But Western modernity is the direct antagonistic factor to decolonization, because Western knowledge is totalizing. It is saying that it was Newton and only Newton who knew or saw an apple falling, and then out of nowhere decided that gravity existed and created an equation, and that is it. For whether people knew Newton or not, or whether whatever happens in Western Africa, Northern Africa, the thing is, the only way to explain gravity is through Newton, who sat under a tree and saw an apple fall. So Western modernity is the problem that decolonization directly deals with, to say that we are going to decolonize by having knowledge that is produced by us, that speaks to us, and that is able to accommodate knowledge from our perspective. So if you're saying that you disagree with her approach, it means that you are vested in the Western and Eurocentric way of understanding, which means you yourself still need to go back internally, decolonize your mind, come back and say, how can I re-look at what I've been studying all these years? Because Western knowledge is very pathetic, to say the least. I, from a decolonized perspective, believe we can do more as new knowledge producers, as people who are given the ability to reason or whatever is that people say we do when we think or rationalize. So decolonizing the science would mean doing away with it entirely and starting all over again to deal with how we respond to the environment and how we understand it. Thank you.
Okay, I have a response to
Order.
So I'm going to speak on the practicalities of the TRC as well as the website. What we had envisioned the TRC to look like, and the institutional review sense, and also the engagement with students provided. There'd be 3 commissioners. I'm not going to say the commissioners' names because I like to keep them. It wouldn't be proper to say like that. But we considered there was a short list of seven names for commissioners, which the institution contributed to, and as well as students and workers contributed to. We'd shortlist that to 3, and then they would sit over a process where there's demands from students, there's demands from workers, there's demands from academics, there's insight from alumni, there's insight from different faculties and the Vice Chancellor in particular, the institution in particular, council, ourselves as people who've been leading the protest. And those demands would be put in submission form, whereas the commissioners would look at them and have the process that would last around 2 weeks, where at a daily basis, like there'd be public engagements and witnesses and sort of interrogations of submissions that come in demand form, where we'd interrogate how we could construct these tangible solutions to the demands that exist, and timelines and timeframes would be set by commissioners who are independent of the process, independent from students and stakeholders and the institution itself. They'd be the ones who develop timeframes and would be binding beyond council's power. They'd set timeframes and solutions and recommendations and resolutions that would be binding with reference to all of the various stakeholders. So I don't know if that's still philosophical, but I think it's very practical in terms of how the demands will be submitted and engaged with on a daily basis. And then I think what would be viewed as the core part or the initial stage of the TRC would be submissions by those who've been interdicted and suspended and expelled. After those processes have been lifted and demonized, they'd make submissions as to why they did what they did, how the institution inflicted violence upon them, and how violence that existed on campus was in response to institutional and structural violence. And then at the commissioner's discretion, there'd be a restructuring of the disciplinary processes that exist in UCT, and those would be framed in a sense that would consider political instability on the campus. So that the disciplinary processes that exist currently would be restructured to suit political instability and to speak to the lived experiences of Black people and to speak to how institutional violence antagonizes certain responses. So there'd be that stage-by-stage framing on a daily basis that interrogates all of the demands and resolutions that come from students and stakeholders in the institution. And the resolutions and timeframes will be set by commissioners. I don't know if that helps.
I'll take up to the next round of questions and then open up to the WhatsApp questions. So I'll 1, 2, 3, 4. So and then the WhatsApp questions. So number 1, please.
Hi everyone, thanks for this question. I think just going back to the question of decolonization and how do you decolonize science. So when Snow was spoken about, so I'm from the sociology department, and this question came up and people said, what is pre-decolonial education? And my response was, I don't know what it is, because I think that it's a very complicated question, but I think it's just the commitment to finding out. The fact that we can sit, and I think for me, science is a very, so I'm not going to try and declaim what science is not, but it's very essentialist and foundationalist. The fact that you can sit and rebuke the fact that maybe there is no witchcraft, there is no this, there is no ancestors, that's my whole belief. And I think the very essentialist and very foundationalist kind of aspects that we have towards things, the fact that science is absolute and it can't be questioned. We're not saying debunk it, but we're saying just start to interrogate particular things. I can't say what the science faculty can do, but that's what you guys are saying. You guys are scientists, you guys know the faculty. Surely you can't be asking people who are not maybe specific what you can do. I think that you guys can figure out those questions. It's just the commitment to trying to figure out. It's the commitment to question. It's the commitment that I can come as a Black person and speak about the beliefs that you guys maybe not think can be scientifically expressed. It's able to have that space. You accommodate people's beliefs. Because things like, I don't want to call it witchcraft, because that in itself is problematic. Things like that are a very big part of my life. I'm also still very
modern, but that's part of my life. And the fact that I come to a space where we learn about science and all of a sudden our beliefs are they're non-existent. And I think that's what people speak to, the fact that science has been used as a very oppressive device. So it's how do we get to a place where as scientists you guys don't reproduce the same things. And I don't think anyone's coming here with answers. We all don't have answers. Like we're 23, 22 years old. We don't know what these certain things are. But it's a commitment to finding out so that we don't reproduce the same oppression. So that in a few generations, another culture, another race doesn't come into the space and feel like their whole existence, because it can't be explained by formula or what, the whole existence doesn't exist. So I mean, we took the stance in sociology department. But we don't know. We can't tell you what we mean by decolonization because it's a process. We need to sit and then discuss what we actually need. What is actually free education? Because people still need to eat, people still need to travel. But it's the commitments to doing things. And I think we want to sit there and have someone have a whole full plan and then we can agree. But can we not agree? Can we not have faith in the fact that this is something that we can produce? It's going to take a lot of years. Free education, and I've never heard any of the processes saying that free education is going to happen tomorrow. These are very students, amazing, brilliant people. They know that it's not going to come tomorrow. So I feel like also we need to change our attitudes of being antagonistic and not being realistic. These are brilliant students. They're also going into qualified to see it. They understand the practicalities. So can we also not come with problems, we come with solutions. It's just the commitment. That's what commitment is always saying. It's the commitment for progress. Thank you.
Number two. Was it?
I don't know if it was me, but I'll just take opportunity anyways. Just on speaking on decolonializing science. So I'm in the middle, that's my baby sister. My older sister is an outreach astronomer at the SAAO, but before that she did a tertiary education at UCT. She started here in 2003. By the time that she reached her third year, so there were two girls, there were 10 people in the class, 8 white males, 2 people of color, her and 1 other colored girl from Paul, who had to travel 4 hours here and back every day from Paul. There were only 2 people of color in the honors class as well, and she is the first quote-unquote black, I guess, you know, technically black. I don't know if it's with a big P or the small P, I don't know. Person who worked on the SKA, postdoc to work on the SKA, and people keep thinking like, why is this girl, I keep getting interviewed and stuff. It's because she's literally the only one. There is no one else like that. It's not because, I'm not saying she's not special, but that in and of itself is a problem. And she actually gave she gave several interviews that are available on SoundCloud. I can also even share it on the G Drive. And one of them was specifically on decolonializing astronomy, because that's where she works in. I don't know if anybody knows, but the astronomy textbooks that they give people, or that we prescribe in S1000 or S3000, are made for the Northern Hemisphere. So you literally have to turn it upside down. So when you are sitting in your, at home in a different province, and you look up at the sky, that is not what you see when you get here. So, you have dreams of figuring out, I really want to know what happens in the sky, why do so, shit that you ask yourself before you come, sorry, things that you ask yourself. And you want to get the answers, but when you get here, the book doesn't reflect your reality. That's one practical way in which we can change it. The second thing is that specific textbook, in the space of 1 year, the price doubled because of, I don't know what happened, but then a financial barrier was created where people who couldn't afford the textbooks didn't go into that stream, because astronomy is a very specific stream, and they had to choose cheaper options because those textbooks were cheaper to buy. People who could afford the astronomy textbooks were able to continue and go into that stream. So there are practical ways to decolonialize science, but one in particular is textbooks. First years are so scared about the edition of the textbook that they buy. When you try to sell second-hand textbook, they're like, no, but my teacher said we have to have this because of the page number and blah, blah, blah. There's an index. You can go look for the index. The facts in science aren't changing that. That rapidly, that we need to
tell people that you have to have the new latest edition that costs 2,000 Rand instead of buying a second-hand one for 200 Rand. It's that fear that keeps, that they indoctrinate the first years with, because they come here knowing nothing. But sorry, I'm not trying to be angry or anything, but you know, that's a practical way. I know that people like to say you can't decolonialize science because it's a fact-based subject, but those are some of my facts.
Apologies. A few of us, I think, need to excuse ourselves. One of our colleagues has just been arrested here at Browbeaten Police Station right now. It's Mascolemland, so we need to move because it's going to be very difficult to maintain composure in the space while we're worried about that. So I think, thank you for this process. Hopefully we can do it again in a more constructive and a manner where we can end on a positive note, but we need to run at the moment. But apologies.
To stay for 10 minutes, so we'll take a few questions and then we'll see what.
We still have, sorry, hands 3 and 4.
Can I just, before we continue, we can propose, if you guys would like to continue the space for another hour in order to discuss as a group and not so much questions to the chairs, then yeah, we can do that. Or if we would like to close at the proposed time, which was 3 o'clock, which is 15 minutes, so it would be after we finish Q&A with the SRC candidates. Yeah, think about it and we'll vote on it in 10 minutes.
Yeah. 3.
Okay. Just a comment and then also a question. The comment would be maybe just as a personal realization, but probably, my opinion probably isn't going to shape national policy. But the way I view that opinion can very well shape the relationships that I do have. I don't know how we engage and have heated, deep discussions and also respect each other. And I don't know how to do that. And I've said some things over the last couple of weeks that I've gone, oh, can I take it back? And I apologize. I don't think I've said it directly to anybody, but there's some people that I have disrespected and I didn't mean it. I didn't know some of the things that I know now. And then a question, in 2012, a document was drafted, a commission was set up to look at the issue of free education, and a report was issued. And I'm just wondering, has the collaborative read that report, and what are their feelings on some of the recommendations made in that report?
Yes.
So I just want to talk about the whole decolonization thing a little bit. So I feel that the experience I've had in biology, I'm a biology student, is that as a whole, the Southern Hemisphere is quite at disadvantaged in terms of the amount of research that's been done in the Southern Hemisphere as a whole. So I think we also just need to remember that it affects our country a lot, and it also affects the Southern Hemisphere. And I think that is something we need to try and look at as a practical way of saying, all this research has been done in the Northern Hemisphere, so yes, we can learn about that. But if we want to tackle issues in our own back garden, in the oceans here, in the savannas in South Africa, we need to look at putting more into research in the Southern Hemisphere. But I have a slight concern in that I've worked on a few volunteer projects in conservation with animals, and they rely heavily on international donors to get the funding they need to do that research for the Southern Hemisphere. My concern would be in a very radical change to the way we conduct science. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but if you have a very radical change, that process that we follow, you run the risk of it not being relatable to international forums where a lot of good work is done, like CITES and such. So that's my only concern, and I wondered if anyone else had an opinion on how we could tackle that issue, because you want to maintain that ability to cross borders, because science is it can cross borders, so we need to try and maintain that and assure us, so that we just don't lose that option of accessing other minds, other funding opportunities for conservation, other that, but still maintaining the focus on making sure we focus on the Southern Hemisphere.
Thank you. Sorry, you were noted as number 2.
It's got a question that's a little bit depressing. So basically the two bodies that we have to deal with are UCT and government. So UCT is going to have to get funding from the private sector and government in order to make free fees a reality. So I don't really, to be honest, I don't think the corporate sector gives two fucks about equal decolonized education. But so that means you're going to have to rely on government for that extra money. But both these bodies, UCT management and the national government, both in mind, well, not in my mind, actually facts speak for themselves, have shown a lack of willingness to engage, UCT management level of duplicitousness that I find disgusting. And so where are we stuck with these two the one solution, one partial solution would be for UCT to actually get behind students and protest and bring this to government, but that's failed. They're not doing that. So basically these two bodies on the lower level closer to home, UCT, and further out government, we're dealing with people who haven't exhibited any sort of good faith tendency or made overtures to actually engage. I mean, right now we're having a meeting on fees must fall issue without the Minister of Finance for a financial issue, which shows government's bullshit. So where are we stuck with, two organizations or bodies we've got to deal with are basically full of shit.
I just like to note the WhatsApp questions first, and then I'll open it up to the final rounds of questions and then the final answers from we need to really get going.
How many questions do you like? 3. So the first is there a response from the Sheffield TRC about the makeup of the government interministerial task team on the higher education crisis? So for example, just a comment on the absence of the finance minister and the presence of the minister of police, correctional services and military. And then the other one was, so how can we make the black bodies feel comfortable and acknowledged within the science faculty to foster black academics, especially in the science, technology, engineering, and the mathematics fields? And then the third one was, I'm going to try to reword it, but how do you justify using violence to achieve equality? And if so, where do you draw the line?
So can I answer the related questions and you answer the one specific to the science one? Yeah. So there was one about the document that was drafted, and the one about the government, university and whatnot, and the one about the task team. So I'm going to be very brutally honest, and I've received a lot of backlash on how honest I tend to be about these things. So we have the political question and the practical question, right? I'll deal with that in the second part of my answer. The first answer is, I personally believe, without a shadow of doubt, and everybody who's in the movement for Fees Must Fall, that we're fighting for a genuine cause. People have been financially excluded. People from our townships cannot access higher learning education because they cannot afford it. Monetarily, it has been a barrier for black bodies to access the university space, tertiary education, to succeed in life and so forth. But we come and we attack or we attend to power directly. That is why your government is saying there is a third force. So instead of directly engaging with the fact that we know that there are documents that exist that say it was attainable and there are recommendations, we don't want to go and say we're attacking the ANC government. We are students saying we want free education from the one who has the power to decide. Let them make a commitment. So that is to mean, let them pretend that the document, the commitment that was made prior to 2012 does not exist, and come and say, as people who are calling for a legitimate call, we are going to commit to doing this and make new recommendations which already exist. So what we're trying to do is to avoid directly attending to, I cannot go in a regalia or go against a regalia and say I'm attacking the ANC government, because that's where force and police brutality is used. Because, I mean, regime change, I don't think it's a politically correct thing to call for, but then if the government is phrasing it that way, what we do is we go back to basics. We say, we just want free, decolonized education. Who can give us that? The universities have played an active role in suppressing this. That is why we're saying we're going to deal with the internal questions. I don't want to be shot by Habib's bouncers and Max Price's police friends before I even get to march to Parliament. What we're saying is, if universities say it is not our problem, why did Max Price feel the need for him to establish an 8% subsidy, 1% of the rich thing, when he is not the one who can make the mandate to call for free education? What Max Price was meant to say is say, in their council with Habibs and everything, as vice chancellors, we endorse what the students are calling for. Higher education. How are you going to commit to giving us free education? That is where every, contradiction that exists in this country will be exposed. Because currently we have so much of inequalities and so much of problems stemming from 1994 that have not been dealt with. But I can't come here and say Zuma must fall, corruption must fall. I necessarily don't have the power. The only power I have is to mobilize everyone here to say the least we could do is speak on issues that we understand, that we are directly affected by saying we want free education and we want a commitment now. And we want to see timelines of how we're going to implement it, and then we'll move on to next issues as politicians. I'm not a politician, I'm a student, I want to study, but I cannot afford it, so I want free education. So that is the one answer. The second answer was on how you justify violence. What is very interesting is there are political questions and then there are very practical questions. Practically, the only way to get management to sit in a room with us and discuss these things and meet our demands is if there is any pressure. I have not been involved in any violence, whatever, but I've been committed to the process. I know that I have to shut down in order for Max Price to do it. Another thing that people fail to understand and analyze with violence is institutional violence is not considered violence. They are the first movers who violate it. For instance, all the symbols on campus that continue to worship and continue to enforce white supremacy and white monopoly, and God knows the racist men who have survived on the blood and the death and the toiling of blacks are put up there on pedestals. That is violence towards me. The day I decide to take that painting that I've been crying about from March in 2015 and burn it, that is when I'm seeing as violence. But nobody has called out Max Price for, after being told to take down all symbols on campus that violate black bodies, it's not seen as violence. So let us not be partial about how we understand violence, or let us open debates and platforms where you actually teach yourself and knowledge yourself on how my response cannot be seen as violence when the first response is not seen as violence. And I don't even have the power to force Max Price to do anything unless I say to him, what is at threat, what is at risk, what are you going to be willing to give in order for your institution to continue to flourish, because I also want to flourish. So on violence, I've never beaten anyone for the sake of this movement. We've not in plenaries discussed that. There's no discussion where we plan in which building we're going to torch. We've never torched a building according to my knowledge. Whatever has happened, has happened. And unless it comes from a statement or from plenary from us saying we want to burn in order for free education to come, then I can answer that question. But if any of our formal sittings have not resolved on that, then it is not us, but then it is a manifestation of the anger that has been perpetuated and, suppressed by white power and white ignorance and the blatant ignorance of the things that need to be attended to with immediate effect.
Thank you. I'm going to call for the last round of questions. We'll do that, but I just want to call for the last round of questions and then the final answers. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and into the order. So number 1, please. Please can you start?
I just wanted to address the whole thing, of decolonizing education and decolonizing the science faculty. I feel like, someone said earlier on, that even if we do not know, we can try. I feel like science faculty does not try. Bio is a very, very exclusive course. there are very few black students in the department, and you are made to feel like you do not belong. Black students are seen as inferior than or less knowledgeable than. When your group members all decide to take your work repeatedly, but do not take each other's work, what does that say to you as a black student? Like, can we just discuss that? So I feel like the bio department, or let me just say science in general, there are many things they can do beyond changing the curriculum if they feel so, that can make spaces more inclusive. What does it mean when I'm sorry, I'm a bit nervous. What does it mean when I'm in class and I'm trying to speak or answer a question and I'm being told to speak well, but English is not my first language? Like, what does that mean? There are things that you can do as a department or as a faculty to make spaces more open for black students without even having to do.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Thandani Mlambo. I finished my BSc in 2012 and I'm doing medicine and health sciences here at UCT. And throughout my undergrad here in the Faculty of Science, looking back, I can say that the curriculum is absolutely colonized. I mean, you don't have an Afrocentric way of looking at things. I think science was a great starting point for me, and because it really opens you up to questioning a lot, right? We ask a lot of questions. But the problem is that our answers are very Eurocentric. And that's where the problem is. So you'll ask about lightning, and someone will give you the different negative and positive and all sorts of things, and then you'll accept that. But for someone else, lightning is a weapon, as was said, or lightning can be sent and so forth. And for you to accept that using a Eurocentric view is very difficult. And I think it's actually also very, how can I put it? So we accept things in science that have gone through test tubes and through laboratories and so forth, but we neglect that they originate from the African soil. For example, how many chemicals do we use that come from plants which our grandmothers know that this one will kill you, okay? But up until you take it into a test tube and you heat it up and you say, no, actually this has got a potency. This is a very, very poisonous plant. You get what I'm saying? And there are also ways of our farming. A lot of the farming that is now, it's now being commercialized. But we know when to farm what type of crop. We know what crop doesn't grow in this type of soil. And we can tell by the color of the soil. You know, obviously now I've forgotten because I haven't been back home in a while, but you can tell by the color of the soil I've seen, to be honest, I've seen my grandfather actually tasting soils and saying, okay, you know what, I'm not saying that he can break it down chemically, but the point is, there is some knowledge that we possess, but because you cannot quantify it, you cannot take it into a test tube, you know, and calculate it. And one of the greatest discoveries as I end off, I think for me, was learning about the dog, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing it properly, in Mali, but how they use the stars and how they could navigate in different terrains. And even here in Southern Africa, we've got so many nomadic people that use the stars and use the moons. But because they couldn't, you know, position the Earth in the same way or write down Galileo's equation, we nullify that because they cannot answer in the Eurocentric way that we are looking for the answers for. So I think that we need to change. I miss science though.
Okay, so the first question I have is relating to the financial exclusion, particularly of students that weren't allowed back or aren't given their degrees because they haven't fully paid off their student debt. And I can 100% get behind the idea that if you've written those tests and you have as an individual passed that, you deserve that degree. That I'm 100% behind, but at the same time that I say that, I can also recognize the university in the same way it was mentioned earlier that the only leverage the protesters have is to have the university shut down. I can recognize that a university doesn't have much leverage to get money out of students if they've already given the degree. So in terms of a shorthand or a short-term solution to that, has anything been put forward by the Sharpeville TRC as to how to address the fact that the university, as it currently stands, needs to obtain money in one manner, and if they're going to give out degrees without receiving money for it, then where does the institution draw the line as to how much it can allow, how much debt it can allow people to incur and still give away the degrees. And they kind of extrapolate, well, if they're going to then take up the full cost, then that's essentially what will be our free education, and which would be a great thing to achieve. But that's obviously going to require government input. And so has there been like a form of constructed timeline suggested for the varsity? And then finally, I just, a comment rather than a question that arose out of a conversation I was having with someone else. The whole idea of decolonialization is to some extent a bit destructive as opposed to constructive. So on one level, it's just semantics, I suppose, but they put forward the idea of instead of hashtag decolonializing UCT, to have a hashtag Africanize UCT. So it's like a bit more, I would like to think, constructive and progressive, and rather than going back on something, to rather go forward on something African. So I was just thinking that could be an idea if people want to adopt that as a way to go forward.
I'd just like to say that, first of all, when we say, I think one thing you need to remember, when you say decolonize, I think you need to understand that, as you say, it's deconstructed, it's a breakdown. I think it's a breakdown of this white idea, so it's more inclusive to everyone else. So when we say that we're breaking down, we need to break down these ideas and thoughts, and bring up ideas and thoughts that put importance on the black person as well, on the black body as well, right? And by doing that, we could do that, for example, this is an example. So what could happen is that even the questioning of questions or assignments, it could place importance on black bodies or black companies or black pharmaceuticals that could be put in that, so that a black person who's writing that test or doing that assignment can realize, hey, I can actually see myself in this light, right? Because you must understand that black bodies, at the end of the day, we here for 3 years, right? 4th year sharp, right? And we've already accumulated this debt for so long. And going further than this, we're still accumulating debt to try and become these professors who are actually referred to as well, right? So this whole fees must fall thing is also a decolonization idea, so that we can educate, the people to a certain extent where black bodies and black minds can aspire to go to. Because I remember back being in high school, I was like, become a professor. Nah, fam, I need to get my degree and work, right? And that whole idea of doing masters was not feasible, right? So by decolonizing, we need to break down these systems and put examples in the curriculum, right? That are able to shine light on black bodies being able to achieve such things that are not necessarily out there yet as much.
So I think we're struggling a lot as science to figure out these practical solutions to decolonize science. But I'm a physics student, and we like to think that science is perfectly objective, and it's all perfect, and everything always works, because things usually work. That's what science does. But we need to also acknowledge that scientists are not objective. We all are subjective. And that science doesn't happen in a vacuum. Even though we're doing our research, it has an impact on something. And we need to keep that in mind. And I know we're not engineers. We're not going to go and teach you how to build something. We're going to just study why it works. But we do need to look at our science, look at our methods, and look at where our knowledge comes from. And how much of scientific knowledge was stolen from other parts of the world and created as Western? So much of it. Mathematics is a little those examples. And we also need to remember that a lot of indigenous knowledge from indigenous people was just blankly ignored by Western arrogance. Oh no, these people, these savages, they don't know what's going on. We're Western, we know what science is. We need to get rid of that idea. And we don't need to throw away the scientific method, guys. It works. But we do need to look at our curriculum, where our knowledge is coming from, and how we go about doing science and what these impacts are. We really need to consider those things. And I know it is difficult, but we're scientists. We can educate ourselves on these things. We can listen to people from the other side of campus, actually listen and try to understand. Not just, they don't know what they're talking about, I'm just going to concentrate on my really, really smart science stuff. Guys, I'm a physics student, I know that attitude. And it is difficult, but we can do it. And I think what would really help is if we had commitment from the faculty and from our individual departments to say, okay, we're going to look at our curriculum, we're going to go through it, first year, second year, third year, we want your impact, we want your opinion as students, what do you find could be better, how can we improve that? We want at least some kind of commitment that they're going to do something that's going to help us foster decolonization. So that yes, nobody has the answers yet. That's why we're having these sessions that we need to learn. But if we could get some kind of commitment that, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to try, that would really make a huge difference.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Nikki to say the last statement because people have to go. Yeah, so it's going to be, sorry, those are the last times. But we're going to close officially and then allow for the open discussion to carry on. It's just that people need to get going to the polling station. So, statement.
So thank you very much for having this, because for some faculties this hasn't happened. And there are a lot more questions that I think we could not have covered here today. And I'd like to plead from an activist